The silence in the dining room felt deliberate, the kind that comes from people choosing not to speak rather than having nothing to say. I was Estelle Jenkins, 68, a widow for 3 years, and I'd spent those years living in the small, first-floor bedroom of my son, David's house. 3 years of walking softly, of trying not to inconvenience Naomi, my daughter-in-law. David sat across the table, staring at his empty plate. When the doorbell rang, Naomi's face transformed with a bright smile. Clarence and Dorothy Webster, her parents, appeared in the doorway, pulling wheeled suitcases behind them. They hadn't called. They simply arrived. "Gertie said it wouldn't be a problem for a couple of weeks," Clarence boomed, taking the head seat, the one David usually occupied. David just kept looking at his plate, incapable of protest. Naomi served her parents first. My plate remained empty. The announcement came with the sharp edge of an ultimatum. "Estelle, my parents need a proper bedroom. That room on the first floor is perfect for them. Either give them your room or pack your things and leave." I looked at David, my only son, the man I'd helped when his world was collapsing. He looked down, opened his mouth, and closed it again. Naomi filled the silence. "This is my house, too, Estelle." The implication hung in the air. "You are disposable." I didn't argue or plead. I stood up and said, "I see. Excuse me." I walked down the hall to my small room. Through the thin wood, I could hear Naomi's triumphant voice. Finally, some cooperation. I pulled down my old leather suitcase, worn soft from years of business travel. I folded my clothes with the precise care of a woman who valued control. I paused to look at the framed photograph of my late husband, Maria. I opened my closet and retrieved my most critical possession, my leather-bound financial notebook, which I'd maintained since 1985. I wasn't a fragile old woman. I had nearly $2.8 million in assets, and they had absolutely no idea. I remembered why I was here. 4 years ago, David had called me about the foreclosure notice. I had written a check for $180,000 the next morning to clear the mortgage completely. It wasn't a gift. It was a documented loan, a critical detail noted in my records. Loan to son, to be repaid. I'd also covered their $15,000 wedding and the $8,000 for Naomi's car, plus a constant $1,200 monthly transfer for the past 3 years. They had pushed me out of a house that I had paid for, and now they had discarded me like an old magazine. I closed the suitcase. I walked out, past David, who stood in the hallway, unable to meet my eyes. From the kitchen, Naomi called out, "Tell him dinner's in the fridge if he wants it." No goodbye. I stepped out into the cold night. The cold hit my face, sharp and clarifying. I stood under the porch light and called a taxi. I spent the next 3 days at the Hampton Inn, not grieving, but working. I spread my documents across the hotel desk. I systematically listed every asset and every dollar they owed me. I called my lawyer, Robert Chen, and set the plan in motion. My clarity had matured into strategy. On the 4th morning, I drove to the neighborhood. I focused on the house directly across the street from David and Naomi's, a large 2-story house with a for sale sign. The location was perfect. The view was everything. I called the listing agent, Margaret Collins, and arranged a viewing. Margaret showed me the front sitting room. A panoramic window stretched nearly the full width of the wall. Through the glass, I had an unobstructed, perfect view of David and Naomi's entire front of house. I ran my hand along the wall. "I'll take it," I told Margaret. $650,000 cash, 10-day close. My speed and readiness to pay cash confirmed I was serious. I hired a renovation crew immediately. I demanded speed and paid premium rates. I chose a professional charcoal gray for the front room. The large oak desk was positioned exactly 3 feet from the panoramic window. Angled slightly to the left, I was establishing my observation post. On the morning of the move, I sat at my new desk, my laptop open. I wasn't hiding, I was waiting. At 8:15 a.m., Lights came on across the street. Naomi appeared in the kitchen. A coffee cup halfway to her lips? She stopped dead. She saw me, sitting at an expensive desk, in a newly renovated house, looking directly at her. I put down my pen, made deliberate eye contact, and raised my hand in a slow, measured wave. Friendly. Calm. Absolutely in control. Naomi jerked backward. Coffee slopped from her cup, arcing across her robe. David appeared. Naomi pulling him to the window, pointing. He registered confusion, then guilt. I returned to my laptop, let them process. The phone rang 15 minutes later. David. I rejected the call. A text followed. Dad, what are you doing? My reply. Busy. Talk later. That same afternoon, I executed phase 2. I logged into my banking app and found the recurring $1,200 monthly payment to David's account, the one I'd maintained for 36 months. I clicked delete, confirmed the cancellation. They'd stopped treating my help as a guarantee. 2 weeks later, the final shoe dropped. I watched David sign for a certified letter. It was the formal demand from Robert Chen for the immediate repayment of the $180,000 mortgage loan, complete with documented evidence from my records. Robert Chen was suing David and Naomi. The combination of the lawsuit and the missing $1,200 stipend was suffocating them. Their lawyer told them fighting me would cost $15,000 to $25,000 in legal fees, money they didn't have. I watched the consequences unfold from my office window. Naomi's car, the one I helped her buy, appeared with a handwritten "for sale" sign. She sold it below market value. They had to cancel their non-refundable San Diego vacation. The Websters, who had been there for 5 months, consuming resources and space, became the next pressure point. I watched David enter the living room one afternoon. His posture was different. Firmer, he had a tense, quiet discussion with Clarence and Dorothy. Clarence stood up, radiating offense, but David held firm. Within an hour, they were loading their car. The Websters were gone. Naomi confronted David the moment they left, yelling, pointing. For the first time, David stood up, his hands up, not in defense, but in firmness. They fought until a lamp fell. David was finally finding his voice. A week later, David crossed the street and knocked on my door. He looked exhausted, humbled. Dad, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let her treat you that way. I was weak. His apology was raw and genuine. I told him I would drop the lawsuit, but only under 2 conditions. First, the financial help ends permanently. No more safety net. Second, Naomi must apologize to me, face to face, for how she treated me. That was non-negotiable. He returned to his house. Weeks later, one Tuesday morning, I saw them leaving their house together. David's hand was on Naomi's elbow, guiding her. Her arms were crossed, her posture rigid. They walked across the 30 yards to my door. I opened the door. Dad, David said, Gertie has something to say. Naomi stood there, fighting an internal war. Then, through gritted teeth, she spoke the words, I'm sorry for how I treated you. It was wrong. The words were forced, but they were spoken, acknowledged. That was enough. I accept your apology, I said simply. I picked up my phone, dialed Robert Chen, and put the call on speaker. Robert, I need you to file dismissal papers for the David Jenkins matter today. I hung up. It's done, I told them. But understand, I will not be providing financial help. Not now. Not in the future. You will build your own life based on what you actually earn. They left. I watched them cross the street, walking side by side, closer than they had arrived. I sat back down at my desk. I opened my email and began typing a message to a former colleague about returning to part-time consulting. I looked across the street. David and Naomi were talking in the kitchen. No shouting, just conversation. They were humbled, constrained, but they were going to be fine. And me, I had my dignity back. My boundaries were established and enforced. Justice wasn't about their destruction, it was about my restoration. I was 68 years old, sitting in my own home, independent with my integrity restored. I set down my coffee cup and returned to my work. I was exactly where I needed to be, home, and in control.